What's up? What's up? And welcome to Just Be Humans, the definitive podcast for business leaders who have built their businesses on relationships and are looking at digital marketing to scale those relationships. I'm your host, Danny Murawinski, and this is a very special episode to me. As if some of you that have been following along for quite some time have probably seen that we haven't published a new episode in the last 3 months. And part of that is me kind of diving into myself, right? And I unpack that a lot. I have a special guest on this episode. His name's Tony Cammarata. And Tony is it's a cool story because I first met Tony a little bit over a year ago. He was considering starting a podcast, and I helped convince him just to start and not to have it be perfect. Just get out there, record your first episode, you'll figure the rest out. So he did. He created the Leaders Realm podcast. So it's very fitting that this kind of relaunch of Just Be Humans coming into 2025, that he is my first guest that we share. And this episode, we dive into more of the humanistic elements of who we are as individuals. We talk about self-sabotage. We talk about self-limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, things like that. A lot of things that I went through over these last 3 months as I've kind of torn down the previous version of Danny Murawinski and I've rebuilt him. And it's a little different than our normal show, but I think for what this is designed to do, what Just Be Humans means, it means to talk about all aspects and facets of being humans. Yes, it's about growing business. Yes, it's about, unpacking ways that other folks have built relationships, what kind of relationships they built. Are there nuggets inside of there that we can take to the digital marketing world to help scale those relationships, to help grow their business on a larger scale? It's still the focus of the podcast, but the parts that we don't talk about in digital marketing is the actual human beings, right? Like the structures you have to place inside of yourself as a business leader on leveling up who you are. Because if you level up you will level up your business. You'll level up your family. You will level up your relationships. You will level up every aspect of your life the more you level yourself up. You put in hard systems, get up early, work out in the morning, meditate, read, journal, all these things. There's a reason why the bulk of the most successful folks, athletes, entrepreneurs, do this stuff. And it's because they understand that if they can become the best version of themselves, the business gets directly impacted by that. Their content gets impacted. Their audience does. They build a higher level of personal economy. There's a lot of things that happen as you start to build yourself up. So without further ado, Tony, in this episode, it's amazing. It's the Leaders Realm podcast is his again. He also is an Amazon best-selling author. That's a new turnaround since we recorded this. He did just release his book, and within a week, he's now an Amazon best-selling author. So huge congrats to Tony. And yeah, I hope you guys find some inspiration in this. And hopefully for some of you that are going through this part of your journey of, if you're experiencing self-limiting beliefs or self-sabotage, if you feel like you're going through similar cycles and so on and so forth, this is a good one for you guys. Even if you're on the top of your game, it's a nice reminder that you probably had to go through this at some point, right? And that all of us do. All human beings go through this process, especially those that are aspiring to be top performers, those that are aspiring to take their business to the stratosphere. You have to level yourself up in order to level your businesses up. So this is a pretty cool episode. And again, it's kind of back to the roots of what it means to just be human. Enjoy.
What is up, Danny?
What's up, Tony?
How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great.
We're finally doing this, man. After what? About a year of talking about it?
About a year, we're finally getting together and podcasting together.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So listen, I know we're going to share this clip for your podcast and for mine. Just to give my listeners just an overview, Danny and I met at a networking club that we're both members of. Just intrigued by his background and the different things that he's done. He's got an amazing podcast. Some of the conversations that we've had have been just pretty wild. And I think we touched on a lot of things that I talk about here in the Leader's Realm. And I think it's going to benefit my listeners, and I hope the conversation benefits your listeners as well. So, Danny, just give my listeners some, a little bit of a background on you and what led you to podcasting and where you're at now, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Tony. And just for those listening as well, like Tony and I, like you mentioned, we met a little over a year ago. And at that time, it was interesting because I had just started up my podcast, Just Be Humans, which is all, focused on connecting like the human to human experience, even through things like digital marketing. Right. And one of the interesting things I thought was, in hearing Tony's background with his business background and the way that he had generated his business and his relationships. We had some really great conversations then just about what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And just as like that premise, then you started bringing up like the leader's realm and your beast mode concepts and everything else. And I think that's kind of what spearheaded the conversation and how we got into the podcasting space. Because, for me, I started Just Be Humans as a way for people to get to know me better. Both my prospects and the people that's my company Exit Built supports, and also as a way for me to just kind of learn more about how other people in the space are figuring out how to leverage these digital mediums to help enhance the human connectivity experience, right? So that was really kind of the baseline as to why I started. And then shortly after we met, you spun up Leaders Realm.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for my listeners to know, Danny was an integral part in putting all that together. And what I mean by that is you guys have heard me talk about being stuck in that perfection zone. And, I'm guilty of that. And I've struggled with that probably my entire life. And I remember having a conversation with Danny and just going over my concept and some of the things that I was putting together for content. And he just stopped me midway and said, "So what are you waiting for?" And I thought, well, it's not right yet. And, and we met over Zoom, and I remember you looking at me and saying, "What the hell are you waiting for, man? Pull the freaking trigger. Just get it out there. Just get it out there." And I did. I took a shot. I got it out there. And, my first episode I thought was a complete mess. I couldn't get my music loaded in there. I was having glitches with the technology, and it probably took 3 or 4 podcasts, but every time I'd get frustrated, I think about that conversation that you and I had. So you played a big part and a big role in me pulling the trigger and getting this thing going. And I appreciate it, man. I'm grateful for it.
Awesome, man. And I got to give you credit because it always comes back around in some way, shape, or form or the other. But this whole reason why we even got on this call today is Tony and I happened to see each other at that same club. For those local to Tampa, it's the Tampa Club. And we saw each other at a networking event. And he was like, "Danny, what's up, man? Like, how you been? Like, I haven't seen you like post much recently. Like, what's going on?" And I was, I just told him, I was like, "Oh man, I'm going through this next iteration of Danny Murawinski and who the fuck I'm going to become." Right. And I've torn apart myself and rebuilt myself many a times over the last 2 years. And like the last quarter, I've been way in my head on things and just kind of, unpacking a lot of myself. So I went silent, and I think you actually said it, Tony, that I really liked. You're like, "Hey man, sometimes you gotta, turn it off and just sharpen the axe, and
Absolutely.
And that's definitely what I felt like I think I was doing. But yeah, that kind of led us to this moment, and it's cool for me because, I've been sitting on 3 episodes that I recorded back in like late November, and all 3 of those guests were like have been hitting me up. I'm like, "Hey man, when are you going to publish it?" And Tony, I'm not going to lie, I just didn't respond. And I knew I was going to, and I knew like this year I'm going to get back on it. I want to do it. I want to stay consistent. I think that's my big fear of starting up again is just staying consistent. Because I had moments where I was like doing 2 a week, and then I was doing and I did that for like a month, and then I dialed it back. I was doing 1 a week, and then I missed a couple weeks here and there for X, Y, or Z reasons. And then I just kind of slowly trickled down. And so then you hit a point where it's like, "Oh, I haven't done this in a month, 2 months, and it's like, okay, I got to get it ramped back up." So then I went out and I got the content, reached out to the people. They took their time. I got amazing stories that like I need to share because like I owe it to them too. And then it's like, you kind of hit that moment and you're like, oh shit, if I start this up again, I got to keep going. And like, am I ready to keep going? Am I mentally there yet? Or do I want to hold and get this as like the start? So anyways, this is for me special because, I appreciate you saying that I helped you get started. Well, Tony, you're helping me keeping it going, man. So
That's
appreciate
awesome,
you
man.
for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and like I said, man, I mean, it's something that I talk a lot about. I probably touch on it at least 75% of my episodes where, accountability is huge. And what I mean by accountability is not, hey, Danny, what are you doing today? How come you're not out there? How come you're not pumping? Just accountability, just have somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody to go to and say, hey, man, I'm struggling, and because let's face it, regardless of what it is that we're talking about, we all face the same struggles, right? I mean, especially as men and humans. And I think initially, early on in our early conversations, that's what it was about, right? It was about the humanness and being authentic. And, but, you mentioned something a little earlier, the fear of not being able to be consistent. The reality, Danny, is this. We have to look at it like this. We're doing more than the average guy is. We're taking our time to put together this content and reach out and pour into people that are willing to listen. And if we skip a week, it's okay. But the reality is that we are our harshest critic. And it's real easy to start with that conversation that we had the other night, sitting there having dinner. That's self-sabotage. Well, maybe you're not good enough. Your content's not good enough. And just because you decided to take a little bit of a break, now all of a sudden you're no good anymore. And all of these things start to happen and we spiral. So it's important. And I think there was a reason, God put us at that same place that night because I could tell you were struggling. And, it was awesome to be able to share that moment with you. So I'm proud of you, brother. I'm proud of you to, for stepping in. And I've seen a couple of posts here the past few days about being at war, man. It just fires me up. It's awesome because we're at war with our minds every day, more so than people realize. And it's a battle. It's a constant battle that we have to deal with. And sometimes, there's power in numbers and, we're the numbers together. So
100%, man.
Yeah. So I'm excited for you, man. I'm excited about, seeing the new content that's coming out and these episodes that you've had, kind of locked away and ready to launch. I'm excited about the future. It's a new year. There's just a lot of hype and a lot of excitement out there. I'm noticing.
There's a shift, man. There's an energetic shift.
Yeah.
And, I think everybody can, I think there's really two anniversaries that we feel these paradigm shifts in our lives, right? And one is the start of a new year, new calendar year for everybody. Everybody kind of experiences that. And then the start of your own new year, which is your birthday, right? Like,
right.
Those are really the two core anniversaries that I think we all feel. But yeah, I think, it's really interesting in just the energy that this particular year has over every other year I've ever experienced in my short 39 years of existence. But, I don't know, man, there's a vibe, there's an energy, and I feel like I have tangible results within my world that I feel it. But then I also like feel others and like hear it from others too. Like, and a lot of people like yourself and other entrepreneurs and people out there trying to make something happen. There's a really positive energy that's flowing through a lot of business owners right now.
Absolutely.
A lot of folks.
Absolutely.
It's an exciting time.
The real question is though, how many will have the stamina to push through February, right? So I don't know if you had a chance to listen to last week's episode, but it was all about, reframing our New Year's resolutions, and you touched on this point earlier about the fear of not being consistent. One thing that I always push in my content is that do something.
Yeah.
Even if that means just sit down and jot some notes down on what your next episode will be. And just do something. Do something that's going to benefit that ultimate goal. And your ultimate goal is to reach out to people through the podcasting method. And as long as you're doing something, brother, I mean, that's it. And, you do a lot of stuff. You do a lot of stuff off the cuff that, I don't have the guts to do yet. All your little, live streams, and I get a kick out of watching some of that stuff. And sometimes, that you just pull these little nuggets and it just helps me get to that next step. So I know you're helping, many, many other people out there with the same thing.
Well, one of the things I gotta say, Tony, if I so I think for myself, right, and then I think other people would also empathize with this, but we go through our own internal cycles, right? And I know you and I kind of talked about the good men hard, or was it good men hard times make good men make good times make weak men make hard times,
Right.
that whole thing. And as we were talking about that, that's where I realized I kind of feel like I'm in that cycle myself. And there's, as long as I can remember, there's always been initiatives and things there's been a couple things that have been told to me since I was a child, right? My mother, for as long as I can remember, and even to this day, will tell you that I'm scared to succeed. And as a kid, I didn't quite understand what she meant by that. And then as I've grown and I've really in the last 2 years of ripping myself down and rebuilding myself and learning about who I am and, asking every question under the sun, Tony, when I say I've gone into granular self-exploration inside of my mind, I mean it to its fullest. Why did I hit the snooze button today versus yesterday I didn't? What was it? What was the mechanism, right? Finite things. Why did I get frustrated in traffic in that one moment? Why would I allow that for myself, right? So I've been doing this hyper observation of myself over the last really 3 to 4 months. Things with my kids. Why did I get annoyed with my kid? Why can't I be happy with my kid? Why did I have a struggle with my wife? Why am I frustrated with where I'm living right now? Why do I feel like I need to move? Whatever it is, right? All these things. And one of the things that I kind of realized in this process is I realized that in all of these cycles that I ever get myself into and that I do in my life, first off, I perform the best under pressure. I always have. You put my back up against the wall, I will fight my way through and I will come out on top. There has never been a time that I have had quote unquote the world ending for me in my world, and I haven't came out not just to back to where I was, but I'm always come out better, right? So that's one part of me that I've realized. The other part of me is okay, I've always been able to spin up greatness in some capacity for whatever I'm doing. Whether that be garnering attention, or it be landing a new trick when I was snowboarding, or it be taking an athlete to the next level, or getting amazing results for a client. Whatever it is, I've always been able to spin up these amazing moments. And in that process of spinning up the amazing moments, there's a typically a 30 to 60 day window where I'm performing at my absolute peak, my beast mode, right?
Yeah.
And then beast mode drops off.
Something happens.
Whatever it is. And I think what I realized this cycle, as I've been coming up in my own ranks, right? So, and those for your listeners that don't know my background or history, I was a former professional snowboarder, a snowboard coach. I then started up my first marketing firm as a solopreneur. And then it really wasn't until 2020 when I entered into corporate America in the C-suite. So I was a chief marketing officer, then I was a chief growth officer, and then I started up my company, another company yet again. So I haven't experienced income, a C-suite income, but for the last 5 years of my life, really 4. I mean, we just started 2025, right? So what was interesting is as my income increased, then the abundance of comfort trees also increased. And so comfort was everywhere.
Which leads to complacency. Your back's no
Right.
longer against the wall. But I want to go back to that for a second, because one of the things that I'm constantly talking about is we've got to do exactly what you're doing right now, and that's get granular and become brutally honest with ourselves in order to become self-aware and to understand what and why we do the things that we do. So I'm going to ask you, based on what you said, why do you feel like you perform at your best when you're under pressure only? I mean, have you given that any thought to just really, thinking back, maybe your childhood or even in sports, is it the pursuit of the competition, that adrenaline rush?
I think it's part that adrenaline rush. I've always pursued adrenaline physically in my life. I rock climbed and I've done all sorts of stuff that I should have died a million times. So yeah, I think there is a part of me that I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I've always I've always had a very, very high risk tolerance. I think that I always screw that up. See, the low risk tolerance. I've been accepting of risk. Let me put it to you that way. So, I think like being on the edge of like succeed or fail is a very comfortable place for me. Like
So you're comfortable with it's the comfort, right? It's the comfort of fighting, comfort of being at war.
Yeah.
So I touched on this a little bit the other day, and I struggle with a lot of the same things, and I think that's why we hit it off the way we did, and we can have the conversations that we have. What's interesting to me, and I shared this with someone here recently, and I touched on it a little bit the other night when we were talking. It's pretty amazing that we're so used to whether it's living in chaos or high risk life or adrenaline seeking life or my back has to be against the wall, that we get put onto this path, and we get comfortable with this path because we know that once we hit that rut, we're going to overcome it. We've done it in the past and we're going to do it again. But if I come to you and say, hey, Danny, I know where you're trying to get to. I've been there. I've got a path. There are no bumps. It's straight. It's narrow. It's clean. Nothing's going to attack you. You get excited and you're like, hey, man, I want to take this path. It's the easy way, right? So you start taking that path. Somehow, some way, we end up back on the bumpy path.
It's true.
And the only and it's a struggle for me because I'm trying to figure out. And that's why I'm kind of putting this out there and just getting people's thoughts on it, because it's intriguing to me how many people operate in the same manner. Why do we constantly go back to the painful ways?
Yeah.
Why is it so easy for us? And I think it has a lot to do with reframing. See, my thing for 2025 is just reframing my relationship with food, reframing my thought process, reframing how I approach business and have conversations. And I think because I'm keeping that front and center, it's keeping me from getting to that complacent point. And I've met plenty of successful people in my life, and I've had some great successes in life, but I've also had some shitty years. But the reality is that, like you're saying, to your point, I bounce back, and I bounce back stronger than I was before. But then guess what? It goes right back to the same thing again. And I think what it boils down to, the one thing that's going to keep us going is every time we get to that point where the complacency is taking over and we're starting to slip backwards, because, in my opinion, complacency is the first step in moving backwards.
Yep.
Is we have to redefine our why.
And
if our why, what I'm finding, our why has got to be as important as air. And if we don't find that why that's going to burn in our soul, well, hell, we're okay right where we're at. And when you start doing less work, you're being less productive. And next thing you know, you're right back to where you were, and your back's against the wall, and you got to come out fighting again.
Yeah.
So it's just that constant yo-yo battle.
No, I like that, man. And it's, I think you're right. When it's the easy path, the paved road, path. I think that like just the act of choosing that over bushwhacking your way and creating your own path, right? That's kind of like that first step in the comfort. And as you hit certain levels of success, there are plenty of easy paths. That's what I mean. Like you get access to all of these different ways of comfort through vacations, through, something as simple as like a flight. I'm not going to fly economy. I'm going to fly first class because I can. All of these different little things. And then, yeah, I think you're right. Like as you start to go down that easy path and you feel that comfort and that complacency kick in, it's almost like a subconscious wiring of like your brain that's like, hey, remember, this isn't what got us here in the first place. And then that's where I think, like, for me, I start feeling that self-sabotage come into play. Right. And I think what I've learned in these last 3 months for myself has been kind of two pronged. One is, so the paved road, that, because like I was on a fairly easy path. I didn't have to push myself. Like I did, but I didn't. Right. Like, I know I need to, right? I know I need to push myself, but I could also take the time and enjoy time with my family, enjoy time with my kids. And I did. I've had spent I realized, what my hobby is, if you will, is like my family and my children. Like that's the thing that I love being around. And if it's like, if like someone was like, hey man, you want to go take a jet ski out with me for the afternoon? If I can't put my kids on the jet ski with me, I probably won't take it, So that was one thing that I learned. And then the other part of it that I learned too is, because I was like, okay, I'm going to spend more time with my family and do this. I started doing things that would enable my family and heighten my family's experience, and often myself in the process too. And it was comfort driven and comfort based. But at the end of the day, what was interesting that I found is, like, as I entered into this month and as I look into this year and the goals that I have for this year, I'm like, oh man, I did a lot of things that, I dragged heels on that were minor for myself, such as sleeping in, not working out, um, putting my feet up at the end of the night, not reading, not reading affirmations, not journaling, not creating content, just like all sorts of different things, like turning off a lot of stuff. And sure, I was able to focus more on my kids, but Tony, there's an interesting thing. I said this to my wife. So my wife has two businesses. She's got a coffee shop here in Palm Harbor, and she's got a charcuterie business. And my wife has struggled with the coffee shop since she opened it. It's been open for 2 years. And literally 6 months after she opened it, she's like, I want to quit. What am I doing? I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, we don't need that. It's not like a major income producing thing for us, And she's like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? So I coached her off the edge, and I was like, hey, what you're doing, sure, we're having to figure out new ways for childcare and school and things for the kids, that you're not with them 24/7, but they get to watch mom build something. Like, they get to see it and feel it and touch it and be a part of it. And that is a lesson that you can't teach through books. You can't teach through academia, to watch mom build something in real time. And I started thinking about my boys, and, my oldest boy, he's 6. He's definitely starting to get, like, much more aware of what dad does. He just, he wants me to create a homeschooling course for him on how to make his first $1,000 online.
Wow.
Like, he's interested in this type of stuff.
That's awesome.
And I realized, like, the lesson that I could be teaching my kid right now more than anything else is, hey boys, this is how you operate as a man, and this is how you create the life that you want to create, through creating your own business, creating your own products, creating your own services, enrolling people into your vision, all that type of stuff. And that's when I, like, kind of had my kind of come to Jesus moment and thinking about it, where I'm like, okay, what derailed me? What pulled some of my focus away from that? And if it, like, and ironically, it was spending more time with my family. But spending more time with my family meant I wasn't doing as much for the business. And if I wasn't doing as much for the business, then I wasn't demonstrating to my kids, like, hey, here's how you do this thing.
Right.
So the big aha moment in all of this, like we've alluded to, is that I started realizing I have these self-sabotaging behaviors. So the easiest one to describe is the alarm. So for the last, I don't know, 5-6 months, my alarm was set for 4:30 every morning. Now, when I went to bed the night before, the intent was that I was going to get up at 4:30 and I was going to work out. I was going to meditate, I was going to journal, I was going to work out, and then I was going to help get my kids off to school and then start my day. Right?
Right.
I hit snooze every day for the last 5 months on that alarm, to the point that my wife was like, "Why are you setting this stupid alarm?" Right? Because it's waking her up too.
Right.
And so, like, it's those little things. And then, like, you come up with your excuses, right? And you come up with why oh, well, I didn't need to do it today. Or, oh, I stayed up extra late last night. Oh, my body was achy, whatever. Like, you come up, you tell yourself all these stupid excuses. And when I brought this up to one of my good friends, he's been like my ongoing mentor with all this stuff, he goes, "Danny, did it ever dawn on you that you do that so because it's easy to fail. It's easy to fail yourself. It's easy to fail. And if you do that, well, because you have a high level of self-awareness and accountability, you feel like you're being accountable for it because you're like, oh, I didn't do it because of this." And you can stand behind that. And in a weird way, you feel good about it because you're like, oh, at least I'm taking accountability for it, even though you still failed, and you're forcing the failure on yourself, right?
Absolutely.
It's a really weird circumstance. So my 2025 thing is eliminating all self-sabotage. That's why, like, the stuff that you're seeing when I post, like, I'm going to war, that's what I'm going to war with. I'm looking myself in the eye every day and I'm like, all right, you son of a bitch. Like, what are we doing today, Danny? What are we going to do to overcome this? So yeah, that's I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around
Yeah, no,
that.
I mean, I listen, I struggle with the same stuff. I remember when I started down this path 3.5 years ago, trying to get healthy again and all that. I mean, the alarm thing, it just resonates inside because I used to go through the same thing. So what I realized was, in order for it to work for me, I had to break it all down to the ridiculous. And what that meant, Danny, was when my alarm went off in the morning, of course, I wasn't as ambitious as you at 4:30, but I had mine set at 5:30. That alarm would go off and I'd say, okay, your feet have got to hit the ground. That's it. It wasn't, hey, when your alarm goes off tomorrow morning, you've got to go, do this, this, and this and get to the gym and all. It was literally, the alarm goes off, get your feet on the ground. Then the next step was, once my feet hit the ground, get to the bathroom, brush my teeth, wash up. The next step was to get dressed. The next step was to hydrate. The next step was to get to the door. And when I say this to people, they look at me like, I've got 3 heads. But for me, and I think for a lot of us, we've got to break things down to when I say micro goals, I'm talking about micro goals until we create that habit, because it's real easy. Like you said, it's easy to fail and it's real easy to get out of a habit. When I talk to people about recovery time, you need to take a day off to let your body recover. That's great. Day and a half tops. You get to day 2, day 3 is going to be a lot easier. So is day 4. Next thing you know, you're hitting the snooze button. So
you know what that reminds me of, Tony? You ever see Kill Bill?
Yes.
A long time ago. Remember the scene with Uma Thurman when she gets out of the hospital and she's sitting there in the parking lot in her gown and she's staring at her feet and she just keeps going, "Move your big toe."
Yes.
Move your big toe.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy, man, but that's what we have to do. And if you think about it, if you switch the hat for a second, we get away from, the personal growth here and we talk about business, right? Look at how things have changed over the years. It used to be years ago, you go and buy a car or a boat and, hey, it's $75,000 for this boat. Okay, great. Let's work it out. Try to negotiate it. It's no longer like that, man. Now it's, $549 a month.
Yeah.
Within a few years, it's going to cost you $102 a day. That's everything gets broken down to the ridiculous. Early in my sales career, I found great success with breaking things down to the ridiculous. I started in the payments industry selling check verification systems. And the company I worked for at the time, They couldn't, because we used to do everything on leases, monthly leases. And they would give me my suggested lease range. And I think at the time it was like $30 or $35 a month. And I would come back with these $49 leases. And one day one of the owners of the company said, "How in the world are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, I just break everything down to the ridiculous, and that's the number we fall on." I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" What I would literally do is I would walk into a business and talk to them about this product. And I would say to them, I would break it down to whatever, $1.75 a day, whatever the math worked out to. And the way I would sell it to them would be, hey, if I'd be willing to come in here as an expert and be able to tell you when someone was writing you a check, whether or not that check was going to be good or bad, would you pay me $10 a day? Oh, hell yeah, I'll pay you $10 a day. Absolutely. Awesome. Because this isn't going to cost you anywhere near that. And I'd break it down to the just complete ridiculous. And whatever that number fell at, the number fell at. So I would take $1.75 a day, multiply it out, and that was what the monthly lease was. So we have to do that with ourselves. I think it's part of our human condition. And the way things are changing and the rapid speed that things are moving these days, we have to be responsible enough to just stop and say, hey, listen, I've got to stop looking at everybody else's success. I've got to stop, and this is really important, I've got to stop worrying about what everyone else is thinking. And I've got to focus on me. Because part of that self-sabotage comes in, for me anyway, and tell me if this resonates with you. I didn't get up at 5:30. I didn't make it to the gym. I didn't work out. My back was hurting. I'm a little tired today or whatever. But then the self-sabotage comes in, and it's that voice in your head saying, I told you you couldn't do it, Danny.
Yeah.
I told you couldn't do it. And then what do? We buy into that lie again. And the same thing happens the next day. So I think part of my thing, we talk about, reframing, is reframing the way we think about it, and not so many people are setting these goals. I was shocked when I was doing my content, when I was doing research for my content for last week's episode. Over 80% of people that set New Year's resolutions fail by February 1.
I believe it.
And to me, that's just shocking to me. But I think the reality is that so many people set these huge goals. I'm going to lose 100 pounds. I'm going to make $10,000 extra to go on vacation with in the next 12 months. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. They don't do it with a plan, and they don't break it down into the micro goals needed to get there. So how are you going to lose that 100 pounds? Well, I'm going to go to the gym like everybody else. Okay, what else are you going to do? And they don't put enough thought into doing that. However, if they go to their job, they're putting all that thought into what they're doing with their job, but they won't do it for themselves. And that's where the reframing comes in. We've got to reframe how we're thinking, how we're talking to ourselves, because then that beast, not the good beast mode, but the mean beast comes out, and we start beating ourselves up.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think, you're spot on the goal setting. I think a lot of people I experience, I did it myself. Like you make these big audacious goals, and you're like, you get all revved up. You're feeling great. You're going to do it. And you hit the pavement hard. And what you fail to realize is to actually achieve the goal that you want to do. What you're really saying is, I'm going to adopt a new lifestyle. I'm going to adopt and to do that, what you're really saying is, I'm going to adopt a new identity.
Absolutely. And
then to do that means that you have to say, I'm going to let go of that previous identity that I held on to for so long.
That's a scary thing too, isn't it?
It's super scary. Super scary. Like the first time I experienced that is when I quit drinking a year and a half ago. And it was like day 3 of quitting drinking. Right. And at that point, I was a heavy drinker leading up to that. I quit cold turkey. And, I was feeling all sorts of different emotions about all sorts of different things. And I was going to meet my sister-in-law at the Causeway here in Tampa, like on the beach. We're going to celebrate over the sunset. And I just talked to my buddy on my way there. And he was like, hey, how's it going with not drinking? And I was like, oh, it's good. He goes, oh, well, guess what? You're not a drinker anymore. You can say that you can say, oh, I don't drink. I'm not a drinker. And that really changed real quick for me. I was like, holy shit, just like that, I can change my identity. Because like for the longest time, I was known as like the drinker, the partier. Like I always had the best bourbons. I knew how to get the best bourbons. I mean, hell, there was a payment processor guy that I knew that like one of the big reasons we connected was because I had access to bourbon he couldn't get. Like I was always the alcohol. It was always a part of who I was. And I remember he said that. And then I got to the beach, right? And I had to go to use the restroom. So I'm walking by in the parking lot, and there was this guy who had this little like pop-up bar, and he was selling shots, right? And he was like, hey man, you want a drink? I'm like, no, I'm good. And he was like, oh, well, what are you here for? And I'm like, oh, it's my sister's birthday. We're celebrating. He goes, oh, it's a celebration. That deserves a shot of tequila. And I turned to him and I go, oh man, I don't drink. And he was like, oh, okay. And like, he totally shut off, didn't push me at all. He was like, oh, that is a non-drinker. And I walked away, and I remember Tony just like thinking, I was like, holy shit. I just changed my identity. And to the outside, to me, it was like it was a huge deal. But to him, he was just like, oh, that guy doesn't drink. He's a non-drinker, identified as a non-drinker.
Right.
Right. So like, it's amazing. Like that showed me just the power of like how quick and easy it is to change your identity. And to your point, the hard part is letting go of your previous version of yourself and your previous identity and who you were. But it's something like I've always been fairly malleable there. And I think it is part of some of my superpowers in terms of like, I can manifest and create my own new identities. And I think where I struggled in this push that I'm in now is like, I finally think I've done enough self-exploration to realize like, okay, I like physical fitness. I like being sober. I like business. I like marketing. I like communicating with people. I like all these things, right? So you kind of take it out of all the different bread baskets and you put in your ingredients, and now you're forming who this new version of you is going to be. But one of the things that I realized that was getting tagged along in all of those buckets was past performance of inconsistent behavior. So I've never gone a year where I've posted every single day on social media. I've never gone a year where I've worked out every single day. I've never gone a year where I've gotten up early every single day, right? Like, and the list could go on and on and on and on and on. So I realized that as I'm adding these things into my basket and I'm prepared to start this next version of me, but then realizing that this method that I've created of this self-sabotage of dropping my consistency was going to get carried through into it. And that's when I kind of freaked out and paused. And I didn't change this time as fast into the new identity. And it's because I realized I had more inner work to do to understand why I would allow myself to not fulfill on some of the things that I've done in the past, and I think that's part of the fear of like pushing go. So biking, loved biking. I think I even mentioned to you road biking. I mentioned to you that even when like me posting social media content, people I haven't talked to in years are like, hey, you still biking? I actually had that moment last night.
Oh, wow.
So yesterday is the 6-year anniversary of my father passing. And my first cousin, he's a cardiovascular surgeon. He's up in the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. Him and we talk maybe once a year-ish. Like, we don't really talk that much anymore. He was very close to my father. He had a very great relationship with my father. But him and I, kind of went our separate paths for quite some time. So I called him up last night knowing it was my father's, anniversary of passing. And I was just like, hey man, how are you doing? Like, how's life? And Tony, one of the first things that he said to me when it became my turn to talk, he's like, hey, so you still biking?
How about that?
And I'm like, son of a bitch. That's the one thing, like, out of all the stuff that I've put out on social media and all the things that I've shared, the one thing that people remember is Danny bikes a lot.
Right.
And like, it's just, it's so funny to me. And so like, I think there's like, because there's that level of expectation, and then realizing like when I was doing it, I loved it. I was doing 35 miles a day. I did my first 100-mile ride. I did a 50-mile race. I did all sorts of things. I had a plan to go from the West Coast to the East Coast of Florida and do like a 210-mile ride and like all these things that I wanted to do. And it was all going to lead up to me biking across the country. And, you know, like I was all jazzed up. And then but I told myself when I first started the biking thing, well, I started the biking thing as like I didn't even know why I started it. Aside from it was exercise, I wasn't drinking, and it was like just the one thing I could do every day. And I liked it. And then I realized I liked seeing how far I could go. So then September hit of 2023, and I did that 30-day push. And at the end of September, leading into October, at this point, I'm like revved up. I'm feeling great. I've already done a couple 100-mile rides, all this stuff. I'm like, oh, I don't have to bike today. I did it.
How about that?
And so I didn't bike. And then I didn't bike the next day. And then I didn't bike the next day. And then I didn't bike the next day until it came to December, and I had a 50-mile race that I had signed up for. So I did the race with no training leading up to it. I went basically 2 months off the bike, did the race, and then I didn't pick the bike back up. And then when people were like, oh, why aren't you biking? I started adopting the excuse of it took too much time. 2.5 hours a day to go 30 miles at the pace that I was at. And oh, that makes sense, Danny. You have a business. And my business, in my defense, my business was picking up, but I still had the time, Tony. Like I could have,
absolutely.
I still had the time, but it was funny because the people, like as I started to do the biking thing, I did it for myself, and then people started to want to join the rides. And they just naturally like hit me up. Hey man, can I come bike with you in the morning? And then those people we would set a time to go do it, and then they would drop off because they would be like, oh, I don't have the time. It takes too much time to do that much in the morning. I gotta stay focused. And I think I started to drink some of that Kool-Aid.
Sure.
Because then I was like, oh, I probably don't have the time.
Yeah.
And then it just became this thing. And now it's like I did just 2 days ago fill the tires up on my bike, so now it is ready to go. And I was going to. It was funny. Here it goes. So here, you can unpack this one. Last night, I couldn't find my little taillight, my blinking red taillight. I set my alarm for 5:30 this morning, or 5 this morning. I was going to get on the bike and do my 30-mile trek this morning, knowing that I was going to podcast with you. So that way I could come on the podcast and be like, guess what, Tony? I'm back on the bike. So last night at like 9 o'clock at night, I can't find my little taillight. I knew my kids had it. So I'm looking all over the house for it. Can't find it. I can't bike. Like by law, you should not be on the road without a taillight on a bike. And that's very dangerous. So I wasn't going to. But I was like, well, maybe I'll find it in the morning. Alarm goes off. I hit snooze. 7 o'clock rolls around. I get up and I went into work, didn't bike. You know, like, and I know, like, so what would have been the solution? Stay up and look for the light, find the light, find an alternative light, anything, right? Like come up with a solution. Or what I'm planning on doing is after this, I was going to go hop on the bike today for the first time before my wife has a thing at 5. But if my plan is to at least get like a 10-mile ride in after this call. So at least I can say I did it today. And then I need to go find that taillight. But yeah, it's, like, you're bringing, I don't know. There's
you're bringing something up that really hits home and resonates, right? So one of the things that I push a lot is just do something. So my question to you is, how you ended up taking this day off and the next day off and the next day off, and how it just became a permanent thing. Okay. Had you reframed that thought process, because it led to you saying, well, it's 2.5 hours at the pace that I'm at to go 35 miles. Had you said to yourself, hey, I'm just going to get up and just do 5 miles tomorrow morning, do you think that would have helped? Chances are, knowing your personality and some of the things that you've shared with me, you would have gotten on that bike with the intention of going 5 miles and you'd have gone your 35. So do you think maybe that would have, and I had and I've had the same conversation with a friend of mine, actually several people. Do dear friend of mine, some of my friends now, they're starting to see the results that I've had over the past 3 years. And I'll share some of that here in a little bit. But, they're just getting gung ho, man. I want to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it, And one of the things, and it's becoming a running joke, a really dear friend of mine, he's like, all right, man, I'm going to start. I'm just going to start walking. And I'm okay. Awesome. About a week goes by and he starts sending me these GPS maps of, this run that he did. I'm like, what are you doing, man? And he's like, oh, he says, I ran I ran a 5K and I'm trying to beat my time. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You're going to get hurt. And he says, well, I used to run 5Ks all the time. Yeah, well, 15 years ago, you've got to start somewhere. And sure enough, man, he ended up with shin splints, took some time off. It's done. He hasn't been back. Or, other people that say, you know what, man, you're inspiring me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get on the, I have a rowing machine. I'm going to get on the rowing machine and go 30 minutes. And, hey, how about this? How about you just go sit on the rowing machine and you go as long as you can go? If it's 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. If it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. Again, just reframing how you're going to approach it. Because if you get up in the morning saying, or you go to bed at night saying, I'm going to ride 35 miles tomorrow. You're going to wake up and something's going to come up. I don't have the time. I hit the snooze button too many times. I don't have the time now. And I struggle with the same stuff. I did it with the, I do a lot. I train in martial arts. I work really hard at it being an older guy. It's tough. I've had some great success at it so far. I've had some nasty injuries too. But in conjunction with that, I was literally doing 2-a-days. So I would be in the gym in the morning lifting. And then at night, I would be in the dojo training. And my excuse was I went to put a dinner jacket on one night and it was tight in the shoulders. So the excuse I gave myself was, hey, you got to lay off the weights a little bit because you're bulking and your goal here is to thin out before you start to sculpt. So I said, I'll just take a little bit of time off. I can tell you an entire year went by.
Mm-hmm.
An entire year went by. Now I stayed consistent in the dojo and the martial arts and all, but I completely left the gym and I felt it. I saw it. So now it's having to, again, reframe and let me just start. Even if I'm in there 1 day a week, it's 1 day more than I did last week. So I think it's in these situations, because of our personalities, Danny, we want to, we know what we're capable of and we know what drives us. So we set these goals that are just way out there. And life gets in the way. And it's real easy for us to hit the snooze button. Matter of fact, I think that'd be a great podcast for me. Great title. Hit the snooze button.
Yeah. Hit the snooze button.
So I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think maybe if you, at that time when that happened, do you think the time excuse would have popped?
So, of course, and I had friends and, you don't have to do 30 miles. You don't have to do 35. You can do 5. Why don't you push to see how fast you can do 5? And then then eliminate the time excuse, right? It's the best way to. Here's the way that I kind of approach all sorts of walks of life for me. And maybe this is part of the reason why I have an issue. First off, the logic of do 5 miles, do it fast, high energy, whatever, totally tracks with becoming a better biker. Totally tracks with eliminating time excuse. Totally tracks with staying consistent, everything, right? Logistically, that makes perfect sense. And you can't argue that logic. I couldn't argue it then. I was told that. I couldn't argue it then. But where my vision for what I wanted to do with this bike wasn't to do fast 5 miles or fast 10 miles. My vision was to go 100 miles a day every single day for a month and go across the country. So to me, I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I wanted to do. And then what's funny, because as I say it, right, like you can literally hear the excuses rolling off my tongue right now as I talk through this. Like you can hear it. I can hear it. Because there is no excuse, Tony. That's the point. And I think that's kind of the point that you're making. Just like you're talking about your shoulders, you're bulking up. You know, like so many people hear that, right? And they're probably like, that's a problem? You were gaining muscle? You know, like, well, it's crazy what we put ourselves through in that process, because, you know, to your point, it's like, okay, we'll just lay off the shoulders a little bit, right? Like do legs. You know, there's a bunch of other things you could have done to just keep the track and the momentum going. And I think that
Absolutely.
that's one of those things, Tony, that you know, here's one truth that I've learned so far in my life. Momentum is the most powerful thing on the planet. If you can get yourself in momentum and you stay on momentum, it's amazing what you can achieve and accomplish and do. So when I went sober, those first 3 months, I was biking every day, I was working out, and then it ramped up and everything else. I like 5x'd, 7x my business in that small time frame. And that was, you know, 2 years ago. And then it's like, and then you're like, okay, so Danny, if you that's probably one of the hardest things for people to do. So like from a professional career and then a personal growth thing, right? It's like I was killing it in personal growth, and professionally I was killing it. And that's what everybody's trying to get for the most part. And so I had it, and I had the formula, but then I stopped. And then I still grew, and I still luckily I still had you know, at least for me internally, like I was still had clairvoyance. I maintained sobriety. I'll have a drink once, you know, maybe 6 drinks a month tops, glass of wine with a nice meal kind of thing. But I have alcohol fully under control.
That's awesome.
But
congrats, man. I know that's a hard thing. Congrats.
That was I'll tell you what, if there's anything if there's any message I could get out to anybody as far as like the alcohol thing's concerned, it's God, it's like reality is so much better. Like it's just so much better. It's like reality in itself is intoxicating if you can figure out how to be comfortable in your own skin.
Life is, man, if you allow it to.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
it
really is. I mean, the people that you meet, the stories that you share, it's amazing. You know, like we were talking about your relationship with alcohol. You know, I had that same relationship with food. You know, food was anytime I got stressed, I would eat. You know, I would stress and I'd eat. I'd stress and I'd eat. To the point where it took over my life. So, and for me, again, I've got that under control. Finally. And it's a great feeling, man. It's liberating.
It is.
It's liberating.
It is. It's very liberating. I mean,
I've shared some of my story with you in the times that we've spoken. I mean, you know, 3.5 years ago, I was pushing 300 pounds.
It's crazy.
I'm only 5'10". My blood pressure was crazy, high cholesterol, and it got to a point where they were, you know, testing different cholesterol meds on me because I would get side effects with one and then side effects with another. And then it's like, well, let's give you this other medication to help with those side effects. And, you know, and I found myself in a situation where, hey, if I don't do something, I'm either going to die or I'm going to be one of these people that has, you know, 25 pills they're taking first thing in the morning, you know, and that and some other personal stuff that was going on in my life at the time. I decided that, hey, you know, it's time for me to own it and take control. I did this to myself. And I need to undo it, you know, just like you with the alcohol. You know, you got to be the one that's in control and not let the alcohol or the food control you. And, I did that. And like I said, 3.5 years ago, man, I was pushing 300 pounds. I was wearing a double XL teetering on a triple XL. I had
Wow.
46-inch waist and on those meds. And here we are 3.5 years later. I'm down close to 100 pounds and I'm in a large shirt. I'm wearing pant sizes that I wore when I was a teenager. And, I had somebody tell me about 6 months ago when they said, "What's your goal in all this?" And I said, "Well," I said, "this is going to sound crazy to you." I said, "But I want to see my abs again." And this guy looked at me, who had also lost a lot of weight on some diet program, and said, "Hey, you're too old, man. You might as well forget about ever seeing your abs again." Well, that's all I needed to hear.
Yep.
And as wild as it might sound to some people, that was my goal. It doesn't matter what anybody else thought or anybody thought of my goal. That was my personal goal. And I've been able to achieve that. And I feel great. I'm no longer on medications. It's led me to write the book that you and I were talking about. It's coming out, I believe, if all things line up, it should be available on Amazon tonight. The book's called Fit, Fierce, and 50 Plus, The Ultimate Guide to Sustainable Health and Confidence. And basically what I did in the book is just kind of shared the things that I did to change that lifestyle. So I'm sure with yourself.
Tony, I got to do this. And so first off, Tony's going to send me a link. I want to be your first purchase for that book for sure. But I'm going to share this picture on here. So those that are able to watch this can see it. Did the screen pop up?
No.
Can you see it? Hold on.
Oh, there it comes.
Oh. I just stopped it. Let me try again. Okay. It should pop up now.
Oh, you're not really doing that, are you? Are you? Oh, man. Yep,
there he is, man.
That's it. Yep.
Well, there's a funny story behind this picture too, though, Tony, because you shot me a text to say Happy New Year. And you were like, "Hey, man, you still working out? Still doing things?" And it's almost like, I bet you do. There must have been something in the ether or something, because you knew subconsciously somewhere, some energy was telling you like, "Hey, you need to give Danny this shot to the pills," because I wasn't. And you're like, "Oh yeah, I've been after it." And you showed me this picture. I was like, "Damn, Tony's fucking killing it."
Well, listen, man, I know it's hard work, brother. It's hard work. It's painful. It's mentally draining, physically draining. And I know, just like your buddies say to you, "Hey, are you still biking? Hey, are you still biking?" I tell you what, man, your videos of you knocking out your push-ups and everything that you were doing and outrunning and all the stuff that you were doing would fire me up. And then all of a sudden I didn't see him anymore. And I thought, you know what? I need to poke this guy a little bit. And I just felt led to do that. And I wish I had people in my life that pushed me like that at your age. I'm teetering on 59 years old now, and it's a lot harder. I've had to do a lot of other things physiologically, and I cover a lot of that in the book also, to get my body back to producing the things that it's supposed to be producing in order to get to the point that I want to get to. And ultimately, it's about health. It's not about vanity for me. It's really about the health. I mean, I've got a grandson now since you and I have met, and I want to be around, man. I want to be around when he's 18, graduating high school. And I want to be there and celebrate all those things. I want to be able to get down on the ground and roll around with him and throw the ball with him and chase him around the yard. I want to be able to do all those things. And there's no way in hell I was going to do it at freaking 300 pounds. I mean, I couldn't even take a flight of steps, without being winded, and between the back hurting and the knees hurting and everything hurting and just getting, and the easiest thing for me was my goal at that point when I was hitting, and I never hit 300. I was right there. 296 pounds was the heaviest I got. At that point, I literally got to the point where I verbalized, You know what? It'd be a hell of a lot easier for me to hit 300. My goal was to hit 300 pounds at that point. That's pretty scary, man. And it's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. And I knew I probably wouldn't be here today doing this episode with you had I stayed on the path and the trajectory that I was on. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful. You know, one of the things that I've been seeing coming across social media here lately is, you know, the first thing we should be grateful for in the morning when we open our eyes is that we're alive.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm grateful for that, man. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for the injuries that I've had. I mean, I've blown a hamstring. I tore a pec muscle. But yet I'm just overcoming. I'm overcoming. Why? Because I've changed my lifestyle. That guy you saw on the left-hand side of that picture will never exist again.
100%.
But having said that, back to what we've been talking about with podcasting and all of this stuff, Danny, I mean, one of the things that I've learned about podcasting that God has taught me through podcasting is the podcasting. I started it out with the intention that I want to pour into other people. And I want to be able to touch. My goal every week, like people ask me, well, how many listeners do you have? How many subscribers do you have? You know what? I don't care. My reality is this. My goal each and every week is to touch one person. If I can touch one person, I'm fulfilling my mission and my purpose. So my goal each and every week is to be able to do that. So when I started this, it's like, all right, this is going to be, and I had I'll get into a little bit about how that happened now. So if you would have said to me 5 years ago, I'd be podcasting, I said, you're out of your mind. But I went through a process where I wanted to become a business consultant. I've been consulting businesses through my business. I own a payment processing company. We talked about that in the past. And for 30 years, I've been literally consulting businesses. So I said, well, maybe I should get paid for doing this. So I went through certifications, and my goal was to be a business consultant. Then that goal shifted where I wanted to be an exit consultant. I wanted to teach young entrepreneurs, help them get their businesses to the point where they can exit. Then from there, I interviewed with the John Maxwell team and told them that I was interested in becoming a Maxwell certified leader, team member. And as I was going through the interview process, the guy said to me, he says, listen, I know what you're telling me. I hear what you're telling me and how you want to work with entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs and share your experiences and everything. He says, but I'd like for you to approach this program with an open heart and an open mind. And I said, oh, yeah, of course. He goes, no. I'm serious about this. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I see you as a people builder. And that's where I'd like for you to focus at some point. But go ahead. You go down the path you want to go down. Well, that was in January of 24. March, I went to my certification weekend. That weekend, listening to these speakers and talking to people, and I walked out of there no longer thinking I'm going to be a business consultant, no longer talking about being an exit strategist, no longer talking about any of that stuff. But I walked out of there thinking, I'm going to do a podcast. And that voice in my head was like, are you out of your mind? So I'm doing this. And as I started to put it out there, God started to affirm what my decision was by random people saying to me, have you ever been on the radio? I'm like, no, I've never been on radio. And I'm talking about, these are guys that I talk to, peers of mine in the credit card processing industry. Man, you've got one of these voices, dude. You just maybe you need to start doing videos for the payment processing industry or something, because you just have one of those voices. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Well, I was invited to a Advent Health. They opened the new hospital in Riverview. So I was invited to a luncheon, and it was myself, the executive director of the nonprofit foundation, and the project manager of the whole new hospital being built. And here we are having this conversation. And the lady, the executive director, stops. We're having lunch and we're talking. And she stops. She says, I'm sorry for interrupting you. She says, but have you ever thought about being in broadcast, or have you ever worked in broadcast? I'm like, no, why do you ask? She goes, well, I worked for PBS for 25 years and I was the lead program director for broadcasting. your voice needs to be heard. And to me, that was just God saying, that's where I want you. That's where I need you. And I thought, all right, I'm doing this. And it was shortly after that I met you. And, I kind of shared my idea. I was just getting it started, the putting together the pieces. But here's the point I was trying to make. I took the long way around because I wanted you to hear the background on that. The point that I'm trying to make is that I literally felt a calling and I had to pursue that. Because my biggest thing up until that point in my life, no matter how hard I worked out, no matter how hard I worked, I did, worked at work, great things happening in my life, I felt empty inside. Totally unfulfilled, no matter what I did. And I realized that it was because I wasn't following my purpose. So when I started this podcast, I put it out there, and I'm putting out things that I want to talk about, that I think I'm going to reach one person this episode. That's my goal. But what I learned very quickly was, and you know this, Danny, when you're going through and you're editing and you're listening to yourself back, for me, what resonated were two things. When you stand up in front of the mirror, like people say you should do, and say, you're the best, and you're the greatest, I love you, you're awesome, you're fit, you're strong, you're a winner, you're this, you're that. That's one thing. Okay, great. You're trying to reprogram your mind. You're giving yourself great affirmations. But when you hear your voice from a third-party unit coming and hitting you and going into your ears, it's absorbed totally differently.
100%.
And that just blew my mind to listen to myself speak those words. But then it got amped up from there. And what I mean, and this is the main point here. Once you start to podcast or do videos or put social content out there, you immediately become accountable to those people that are listening.
Yep.
So every single day, I have to check myself. Because if I'm doing something or I'm reacting a certain way or I'm acting a certain way that I'm teaching something opposite of, well, then I'm a hypocrite.
Yeah.
So that in itself, I've built my own audience of accountability partners. And it's just wild. It's wild what's happened and the things that are happening. I mean, a book, really? I shared this with you the other night, man. I was ESL before ESL was around. I had an English tutor until I was in second grade. I had reading comprehension problems. They stuck me in a room with a little screen back there. It was like the microfiche screens. And, these words would come across the screen and then it would stop and ask me questions to check my reading comprehension, to build my reading comprehension. And here I actually finished my first book. And yet
it's amazing.
Yet to sit back and say, damn, dude, you should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of myself. There's still that voice in my head saying, yeah, nah. But I got to tell you, man, when you go on Amazon and you see your name pop up there, it's like, holy shit, I did this. Mm-hmm. And no one can take that away from you.
Right.
So listen, man, I think we're both on the right track, man. I think you're doing amazing things. Don't beat yourself up, brother. We all trip up. We all fall down. The real question is, how resilient can we become? How can we bounce back? But more importantly, man, you've got a story that people need to hear. There are guys out there your age, younger. See, I think that when we hit a certain age, man, we have a responsibility to develop young leaders.
Yep.
And a lot of these young guys out there don't have that leadership, man. They don't have everything they do. Everything they touch is technology driven. There's none of that human authenticity like you and I have talked about so many times. You've got a story that needs to be told. And I can't wait to hear it, man. I just, there's so many people out there that can benefit from your story, the crap that you've gone through. The story you shared about blowing your Achilles and, snowboarding with Shaun White and, doing these things. I mean, those are incredible stories. And you did that.
Yeah.
Not your alter ego. So anytime that voice pops into your head, man, you got to say, hell no, man. Listen, I was hanging out with Shaun White. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. And I really do. I mean, it means a lot. And one thing that really kind of you drove home for me, and it's a lesson I learned, Tony, about 2 years ago, when you talk about that one person. So I was putting out social content, very similar to kind of content that I've been sharing recently, motivational, self-talk, that type of stuff. I put out a piece of content that was like, it was along the lines of like, just get started kind of thing. Like, quit dragging your heels. What are you waiting for? Same kind of thing that we had a conversation about when you started podcasting. And I had a friend that I knew in high school. I had never talked to her like in 20 years. We hadn't talked. And she shot me a note on Instagram, and she didn't like the post that I made. She didn't comment on the post. She didn't share it. I had no idea she even looked at it. And she shot me a DM, and she said, "Danny, I just want you to know that what you just shared is the number 2 reason I just left my husband." And I was just like, holy shit, what did I say?
Oh,
like,
wow.
what did I put out there? What have I done? She followed that up and said that the number 1 reason is that she was living in an abusive relationship for many years, and that she had already, had built up to that point. But I guess she accredits that post to be like kind of the thing to push her over the edge. And she booked an Airbnb and moved away.
Wow.
And that will stick with me for the rest of my life, and that really motivated me to continue on. I want to say it was like that was right before I made the decision to start biking, 30, 35 miles every single day. And you got to remember that stuff, and I think for me too, had I, in the last 3 to 4 months, as I was kind of going into my world and sharpening my axe, if you will, right, and sorting through my own demons and redefining who Danny 10.0 is going to be and all these other things, right? Had I just reminded myself every single day of that person and her message to me, which I still have in my DMs, had I gone back and read through that, maybe I would have moved faster and dragged my heels less, because you're right. It's, we get so caught up, at least for me, I get caught up in the macros.
Yep.
I get caught up in, where the business is going to be in 2 years, and are we hitting the right types of contracts and the right type of customers and so on and so forth. Do we need to grow? Do we need to add more talent to the pool? For the fitness side, it's, do I have the Matthew McConaughey shirt off body yet? Am I going to get that? For the finance side, do I have the 9 figures in the various bank accounts right now? You get so caught up in the macro scope of your big audacious goals, which also brings it home to, your get your feet off the bed, or get your feet onto the floor, right? Those individual people, like, I still talk to her, I catch up with her every now and again. She's now found a new guy. She's doing great. She's planning on buying a sailboat. She's going to start sailing, the US to start. Her goals are to sail the world. She's got this whole new life, all these things. Right. And you're so right, man. Like, it's not about the macros and all this stuff always. It's not. It's if you can put stuff out there, and I mean, and I hope this is true, not just for us in the podcasting world and putting out social content or anything, but like you said it really good, Tony, when we were together last, and you're like, what my goal is every day? To make 5 people smile.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's
right.
it, man.
Like, I think there's a lot of truth in that, man. And there's a lot of power in those words, and there's a lot of power in those things, that if you can keep the focus and the attention there, and I'm kind of talking to myself right now through the podcast, but if you can keep the focus and the attention there of just helping that one person, or just generating that one smile, then yeah, I mean, it's worth every bit of your energy to do it every single day. Especially for folks like you and me, that we do have stuff to give, right? And we do have, like, I think about this in just my experience with people, and I think like the saying, like the vibrations of somebody, like if a person walks into the room and they have a high frequency, a high vibration, the whole room feels it, and the whole room will stop and stare. I think we've all experienced that, right?
Yep.
I think the one common trait that those high vibrational people have is that they have a very, very high level of self-awareness. And I think that that's something
Absolutely.
that I've learned, as I've grown in my own self-awareness, that's something that is unique. And it's hard to do. It's not fun to do. And what you can immediately pick up on somebody else who is self-aware, and you tend to gravitate towards those people. And I think even in that world, like those of you out there that are listening, that feel like you have some self-awareness, that have self-accountability, that have the extreme ownership over your decisions, that realize that everything in your life is your fault, right? Like good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. It's all your fault. Those individuals, I think you're right, man. Like we have a responsibility just as a human species to help others open their eyes to that and help others realize that world, because the world it truly does get so much better. It's so much better when you just accept that it's all your fault. It's so much better when you take accountability for your shortcomings and your good and the good
Absolutely.
things, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's our responsibility. I think it's anybody's responsibility that has that level of self-awareness to help bring that out in others. And that's something, I feel like hell, man, I'm feeling good. I'm going to hop on the bike anyways when we get off of this, and I might even make a little post about it. I'll tag you in it and just like,
Awesome.
but yeah, it's you're right, man. Do it for the
Yeah,
one
we
person.
do, man. We have a responsibility. I truly believe that. I've got, some other people that I've spoken with here recently that have some incredible gifts, and, they feel like they're fulfilling their purpose in life. And when you ask them how, they can't tell you, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. Because there are some people that I consider are so much better than I am. There's that voice. But it's like you said to me early on, man, just do it. Just put it out there. Just pull the freaking trigger. Just do it. And literally, it's become more and more comfortable because of the fact that I've taken the focus off of me and on that one person that I could potentially touch. And it's mind blowing. Every episode that I put out there. I mean, you know this, Danny. You're cut from the same stone. You look at it, you try to edit it, you listen to it, you're like, man, I should have said this. Maybe I could have done that different. But no, I hear your voice saying, just put it out there. Okay, so I put it out there, and every week there's at least one person that reaches out and says, you have no idea how bad I needed to hear that. And it just chokes me up, man, just thinking about it. I had one lady reach out one time and she said, hey, I listened to your episode. All your episodes are great. She says, but this one really hit home with me. I have been trying to get a Bible study started, and I just haven't done it. And this last post about getting out of your comfort zone and all that, she goes, I did it, and people signed up for it, and it's growing, and all these great things are happening. Keep doing what you're doing. You hear those things. It's like, damn, man, I'm doing something good. Most of the guys that you and I, even at the club, man, we go up to the Tampa club. There's all these shakers and movers and big time business people and stuff. They can't say that they touch lives the way we do.
Yeah.
But it's important. Again, that self-awareness to realize, and we need to hear it because of that self-sabotaging voice. And God knows that, man. And that's why God, he has a way through other people to not only keep us in check, but to continue to inspire us to continue to do what it is that we're doing. So,
yeah, 100%.
But yeah, man, you need to get out there on that bike.
It's time. I'm going to do it today.
Yeah, get out there on that bike. Man, start getting this content together. Get those episodes out there.
Yeah, this will be, I'm going to launch this one. This will go live. I'm going to schedule this for Wednesday of next week.
Okay, cool.
And I'll get you over the content. And then, yeah, my other 3 guests, if you guys are listening, you're coming. So I'll send over all of your information, your media packets and everything else. I haven't forgotten. And I do appreciate everybody's patience with it. But yeah, it's time to get back on the horse, and it's time to, like you said, man, it's just keep the, especially for the podcast for me, right? Like the podcast for me is it helps me work through my thoughts. It helps me
Absolutely,
share content for those that want more in depth than like a short little post does. But really, man, like I think I love it. Like, and I think I'm going to adopt it with it. It's like the Just Be Humans is for the single human. It's for one human. And just over and over and over again, hopefully, it helps. And if it helps masses, great. And if it doesn't, if it just helps one person, even if it just helped one person,
yeah,
just one effort, like in the history, like if let's say I did it for the next 10 years and it only helped one person, it's still worth it.
That's it. Absolutely. 100%.
Still worth it.
100. And again, I mean, I know you put out some pretty in-depth content. I've listened to your podcast before, a lot of great details. If you're not feeling it and it ends up being a 15-minute episode, then so be it, man. It's a 15-minute episode, but you did something.
Yep.
And that's, we all need to adopt that mentality. Just do something. And why? It's the way I close out all my podcast episodes, because your best is yet to come. And you don't know when that's going to be, man. And when it does, it's going to be known. It's going to be known.
Well, let's close with that too, man. This has been absolutely awesome. Guys, from my end, this is Tony. He's got Leaders Realm podcast. You can check it out. Tony, do you have any other ways that folks can find you if they want to reach out and connect with you?
Leaders Realm podcast, and I'm on Facebook. My Instagram's not up yet. My website is in the process of being built, but for the future, that's going to be tonyc.coach, or my name, TonyCammarata.com. That's CAMMARATA.com. And reach out through the podcast, or shoot Danny a DM, or find me on Facebook. Love to connect with you. Pick your brain. And that's another thing too. I love when people give me feedback and give me suggestions for podcasts, and just putting that research together. And for my listeners, Danny Murawinski, Human to Human. What's the name of the exact podcast? It's
Just Be Humans.
Just Be Humans. Great content, guys. And you definitely want to hit this guy up on Instagram. What's your handle on Instagram?
It's just my name, Danny Murawinski, Murawinski.
This guy puts up some awesome content. So you never know from 1 second to the next what's going to be up there, man.
So there's a lot of cursing, there's a lot of aggression, but it's all done in the means of positivity. So,
but you're doing it, brother. You're doing it, and that's what matters.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Tony. Thanks so much, man. Thanks for the motivation. Thanks for helping me get this thing back off and running. And yeah, let's maybe we do one. I don't know, one a quarter or one every 2 quarters or something. We get back together and just check in. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. All right, brother.
All right, guys.
I love you, man. Be the best you can be, bro.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I'm sure I'll see you around. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.